Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Justin Duza. I'm a quantitative specialist and statistician here at Statistics Solutions. During today's webinar, we are going to discuss preparation for a quantitative defense. A lot of the advice I'll give will apply to a qualitative dissertation as well. There's a lot of overlap for defense. We're going to send everyone a copy of the webinar in addition to a copy of the PowerPoint. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box or the Q&A box. And at the end of the webinar, I will be doing a question and answer session. My colleague Sierra will also be providing some hyperlinks in the chat box for scheduling meetings or checking out our previous webinars. So if you have any questions, just let us know. All right, so first I'll give a brief overview of the services that we provide at our company. Then we'll dive into today's topic regarding defense preparation. We'll conclude with a summary and a question and answer session. Our company, Statistics Solutions, assists with every part of the dissertation journey, starting with topic development and going all the way to final defense and everything in between. So we help with prospectuses and concept papers, depending on what college you go to. They may require one of these, a prospectus or a concept paper. Some don't require either, and you just jump right into the dissertation. Then we assist with the proposal chapters, the introduction, the literature review, and the methodology. So within there, we can help pinpoint a purpose statement, a problem statement. We can find articles to support your research. We can pinpoint your research questions and hypotheses and figure out what instrumentation you need to use to gather that data and what are the best statistical options in terms of addressing those questions. Then we assist with IRB forms. We can provide data entry templates to you if you're not sure how to enter your data. We can host a survey for you on SurveyMonkey. And we assist with the last two chapters, which consists of the results, the presenting your statistical findings, and the discussion, really wrapping up the dissertation and connecting the findings back to previous literature and providing recommendations for future research. Then we assist with the PowerPoints for both a proposal and a final defense. And we also help with journal publications. So if you have any questions about the services that we provide, you can give us a call at 727-442-4290. And on this slide, you'll see a list of the previous webinars we've done at the webinar archive, and then you can see what webinars we are doing in the future, which may be how you joined us today. All right, so first, what is the difference between a proposal defense and a final defense? Some colleges will only do a final defense, but in my experience, most do a proposal and a final defense. A proposal defense includes your introduction, the literature review, and the methodology chapters. The takeaway is that you want to summarize the key points from these chapters. Focus needs to be on providing a reason for why the study is being conducted, giving background on the topic, explaining the gap in the literature. What are you contributing that no other research has done in the past? And then you explain the methodology for your proposed study. How are you planning to collect the data? What surveys are you administering? What is your population? And how are you going to statistically analyze the data? The final defense contains a summary of your entire dissertation. So it does contain the introduction, the literature review, and the methodology. However, those chapters are condensed and shifted to past tense because the study, assuming the study has already been conducted at this point, and then you have to add your results and your discussion. So the focus on the final defense is more so on the quantitative results or qualitative results And what are the implications of these findings? Did you encounter any limitations? And what are recommendations for future studies? In terms of preparation, my best advice, this is probably one of the more important slides here, is you want to look for a template for your school. Almost every school has a template for their presentations, for the proposal and the final defense. You need to note if there's a minimum or maximum slide count. Most presentations I see range between 20 and 30 slides. And then you want to request for approved examples from your committee. See if they can send you a previously approved example of a defense presentation. And forward the presentation ahead of time to your methodologist and your chair, and see if they have any feedback ahead of time for things you can tweak on the presentation, but also determine if they are going to ask questions during the presentation or if they will ask at the end of the presentation. That way you're not tripped up with a random question in the middle. Okay, so in terms of the location, most presentations now I see are done through Zoom or Microsoft Teams or maybe Google Meet. I think that gives you an advantage in that you can use two monitors where you could have your presentation on one monitor and then you could have your dissertation and notes on a second monitor. You could also print out your entire dissertation if you're doing it through a Zoom meeting and then highlight key sections in your paper that you want to discuss. But also have a summary of all the key talking points. You want to have less bullet points on the slides and more talking points. And ahead of time, do a few mock presentations with your friends or colleagues, and just test out the logistics of the Zoom software prior to your defense. If you're doing the presentation in person, which is a little more rare these days, you want to familiarize yourself with the equipment that you're going to use, if it's a projector, USB, an HDMI cable potentially, and using PowerPoint and a PowerPoint clicker. But even if you're doing it in person, you can still have note cards. Note cards would be very helpful for the talking points. This is a sample template that I see a lot of universities use. It might be in a slightly different order, or the sections might be called something else. But this is the basic template. So we have a problem statement, then a purpose statement, then you jump into your theory and why the study is being conducted. Then you present your research questions and your hypotheses. Then your research method and design. Then you go into your population and sampling procedures, and then you go into data collection. How are you going to collect data? Is it through a survey, or are you using archival data? Then you go into data analyses. What is your plan to analyze the data? So from problem statement down to data analysis procedures, that is really the proposal defense. The final defense incorporates these last two bullet points: the research results, what are the findings of your research questions, and then the implications and conclusion. Okay, so specifically, we're focusing on quantitative methods today, but qualitative, a lot of this would apply as well. So for the proposal defense, the methodology section is where you provide the most content for your presentation. For the final defense, that has to be condensed methodology information to leave room for your results and discussion, keeping in mind that it's most likely going to be fewer than 30 slides. 30 slides is usually the max that I see. So what do you want to present? Typically, I would present the research questions and hypotheses. So you might have a null and an alternative hypothesis. Then you want to summarize your research design. So a lot of the methods and a lot of the results too comes down to defining terms. So you need to have a good definition and a good justification for all the decisions that you're making. So I would recommend doing flashcards potentially if you decided to do a quantitative correlational design, you have to be able to justify that in your defense. So having a definition in your back pocket will be very handy. So depending on what design you use, you have a particular definition for that. And then you define your population and sample. So big picture, who are you going to generalize the findings to? Who are you going to sample from specifically? Is it a particular location in the United States? Is it a certain business organization? Are there any inclusion or exclusion criteria that would prevent someone from participating? Then you give your sample size estimate. So in the proposal defense, you need to estimate how many participants you are targeting. And you can use software like GPower to calculate a minimum sample size, or there are some online calculators you can use for sample size. Then you go into your data collection procedures. This is usually a pretty big section. Think of it like a recipe, from step A to step Z. How could someone else replicate your study just by reading the data collection procedures? So things to keep in mind there, you need IRB approval. Are you going to give consent forms? Are you administering a demographic survey? How long are you keeping the survey open? If you're doing a pre-test and a post-test, how are you going to match your participants between pre and post? Things like that. And then you describe your instrumentation or archival data. So you need to justify that the survey that you're administering is reliable and it's valid. It's been used in the past. Unless you're creating your own survey, where you might have to do a pilot study and validate the survey. If you're using archival data, that's secondary data that already exists. You have to explain the source. Where are you gathering that data? How can we trust that the archival data are accurate? And then you go into data analysis procedures. So this is where first, I would indicate what software you're going to use, if it's SPSS or Stata or R, explain the software, and then jump into research question by research question. What statistical test are you going to use to address each of those questions? Okay, in terms of the results slide, so assuming we're doing the final defense now, this is typically what I would report. If you administered a demographic survey or if you have demographic statistics, I would just copy and paste the entire table or the figure into the presentation. That eliminates the need for paragraphs or bullet points. If you just put the entire figure on there, you can describe it with your talking points. And then you want to briefly summarize the trends of your demographics and how the numbers may align or misalign with the greater population. Then you present descriptive statistics for your variables of interest. So this can include your final sample size, the means and standard deviations for any variables that are numeric. And if you are using a survey instrument, then you can provide the Cronbach alpha for that tool as well, which is a measure of reliability. Then you want to briefly, that's the key word here, you want to briefly review the statistical assumptions. Okay, so for most inferential analyses have assumptions like normality or absence of outliers or homogeneity of variance. This is usually a fairly detailed section in your paper, in your dissertation, but for the defense, you don't want to go into a high level of detail on these things. You want to jump right into your hypotheses. So quickly say, was normality supported? Was it not? Did you make any adjustments if normality was not supported? And then you go into your hypotheses. And I would recommend 1 to 2 slides per hypothesis at the most. Try not to have 5 slides for one research question. You want to summarize the key takeaways for each research question or each hypothesis. This includes providing the test statistics, giving the mean scores or giving betas, the p-values, very important. Usually that is the determination on if you have a significant relationship or a significant difference. And then you want to conclude with a definitive statement for whether your hypothesis was supported or not supported. Okay, so I do have a couple examples here. And this first one is a proposal defense at Grand Canyon University. So this is why I mentioned you have to look for your school's template, because you can see GCU has a template for their PowerPoints. And then, it goes into the introduction. I won't spend too much time on this, but just giving background information on the topic, theoretical and conceptual framework. If you have a conceptual model for your study, you can include that as well. Then it goes into the problem statement, and you can see you can put talking points at the bottom of these slides. Then we go into the purpose statement, research questions, research method and hypothesis, or research method and design. So, justifying why you selected quantitative versus qualitative or vice versa. And then explaining the research design and giving definitions and citations if possible. I think this is really useful as well. Giving a table for all the variables of interest. Are they independent or dependent variables? What is the instrument that's measuring that variable? What is the measurement level? Is it categorical or nominal, or is it interval ratio? Then you can go into population and sampling. So defining the population of interest, giving an approximate estimate for the population size, and then providing the power analysis findings. Okay, so this is the minimum target that this person was aiming for, at least 85 students. Then more on sampling. What is the specific sampling procedure? Convenience sampling, maybe you're using snowball sampling or random sampling. And then the instrumentation. So this person gave a demographic questionnaire. Then this is their primary instrument. And they explained the Likert scale ranges from 1 to 5. How many items are there in total? The instrument has been established as reliable and valid. That's really important to note. And then on this slide, it breaks out the instrument into subscales. So these 4 items measure engagement. These 4 items measure perseverance. So if you have subscales on your survey instrument, that could be useful to report. Then we have data collection procedures. I think this is a little extensive. I probably wouldn't put such a big chart with a ton of text. I would probably do bullet points for something like this. It's easier to read and have more talking points. Then data analysis procedures. Okay, so discussing students completing the pre and post, and then reporting descriptive statistics. And then discussing reliability, and then testing assumptions. So I don't always see this on a defense presentation. I think this is a little too detailed, but you can briefly discuss all the assumptions that are going to be verified. So this person was running a repeated measures MANOVA, and they went step by step through all 7 assumptions. Okay, so testing assumptions, and then how is the research question going to be analyzed? So discussing how the MANOVA will be used and any follow-up tests. Okay, and then references at the bottom and questions from the committee. So that is a proposal defense. This is the final defense. Okay, so this is fairly similar. Problem statement, purpose statement, theory, research method and design, population, sample, the research question and hypotheses, data collection procedures, So this is a good, the other person had a flow chart. I think this is better. It's just less to read, but go step by step to summarize from step A to step Z, how you're going to collect your data. Are you going to use an online platform like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics? And then the data analysis procedures. This person indicated specifically what software they are going to use, discussing creating composite scores, looking at demographics. Here's the assumption checking for this person. For the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, that is checking for normality. So they only had one slide on this one statement, not 7 different slides for assumptions. I think it's good to condense that information. Okay, and this is what I was talking about in terms of just copying and pasting tables in. I think that's a good visual way to present your information. So they copied and pasted their demographic questionnaire, and I think that's better than reading bullet points. And here's the descriptive statistics for their variables of interest. So the sample size, the minimum score, the maximum score, the mean, and the standard deviation. And then they presented the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, which is the assumption of normality. So in this case, normality was not supported. And this final bullet point explains what they did. So because normality was not supported, non-parametric Spearman correlations were conducted instead of the originally proposed Pearson correlations. So if you have any adjustments that were made from your initial plan, that's what you want to discuss in here. Then they presented the findings of the research question, giving specific statistics, and the p-value is very important to report. Is it significant or not? And they concluded with a definitive statement for the null hypothesis was partially rejected. Okay. Then they go into implications of the findings. You could also have a limitation section. If perhaps sample size was a constraint for your study, you can discuss the sample size and any other limitations that you encountered. And then they conclude. And then they do a question and answer session. So in general, I see the presentation can be about 20 to 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer with the questions. And you can see that this one was 20 slides. So for the final defense, this was 20 slides. And for the proposal defense example, that was 24 slides. Somewhere in between there, I think, is the sweet spot. All right, so if we have any questions, you can type those into the chat box. Okay, and Raquel, we're going to send everyone a copy of the presentation and the PowerPoint. Great, thanks for joining, everyone. Do we have any questions? Any methodology questions? We have a question from Sat. How can we analyze content analysis PM value? I'm actually not familiar with content analysis. I think that's more of a qualitative procedure. And that might be something that was covered on previous webinars. So if you take a look at our webinar archive over here, and take a look at, here's one, mastering your qualitative methodology. That might be discussed in that section, that webinar. Question from Raquel, do you have any points on connecting your theory to your question? That's a little bit out of my realm. I focus more on methods and stats and the results. But if you join us for, these webinars here, Mastering Your Literature Review, my colleague Tom will discuss that more in depth about connecting your theory to your research questions. A question from Travis. Do you have an example of presenting a mixed method study in a final defense? What recommendations would you have for presenting triangulation? I don't think I have a mixed methods one handy right now. I would have to look, but it's fairly similar. I think what you would do is, let me open this example again. You just need to partition your quantitative and your qualitative. Okay, so have separate section headings like data collection process. You could say this is quantitative. It's just going to be a longer presentation. It'll have the same content, just more detail. So you'll have separate slides for quant and qual. In triangulation, that's not my realm either. I don't do qualitative studies, but come join us for the qualitative ones we do. Let me see if we have one on the horizon here. Okay, so tomorrow, mastering your quant, or actually that's not qual. Right here, so on the 28th, mastering your qualitative methodology. That would be a good time to ask that question about triangulation. But yeah, in regards to your first question, I would just do separate slides for quant and qual all the way through. Okay, follow up from SAT, content analysis resulted factors frequency, but how do we analyze more in terms of the p-value? I think you'll have to reach out to our scheduling department because I'll need more information to really understand what you're looking for. If you just have frequencies, I don't know if you can necessarily do p-values unless you do things like chi-square tests. If you're looking at frequencies between two categorical variables, you could do chi-square tests in that example, and that does give you a p-value. That might be an option. All right, hi, I'm Umi. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but we will reach out to you if you are interested in the services. All right, do we have any other questions? All right, well, thanks for joining, everyone. We'll send a copy of the PowerPoint and the webinar, and just let us know if you have any questions about the services. And have a great day. We'll be in touch. Take care.